We're back, people, and today we're breaking down film on Greg Dulcich, Miami Dolphins' newest tight end, just added to the practice squad. I would say him and Brents, the two additions that were made, actually have a chance to make like a true impact with this team. Just based on the rooms they're added to, Dulcich, I think, going to the practice squad, he's someone I could see end up being elevated. He has a very intriguing skill set. Had multiple touchdowns throughout this past three preseason, had three of them. He was a guy that also had some of his injury or his career derailed by injuries early on, but he has a pretty decent receiving skill set. Blocking, there's a lot to still be desired, but I wouldn't say like he wouldn't be the worst blocker on the team. There's still at least some sort of blocks that he can make. He's at least willing to do some certain things out there. There's some at least positive blocks you can find on film. So I would say like second best in that area on the team and like receiving and potentially at least some blocks, which you're not going to really get out of Waller. Him and Tanner Connor have a very differing skill set, so you could probably get different usages out of them, even though they're probably the ones most likely to play the same kind of position on the team. So yeah, we're just gonna break down some of this film. Like definitely like the Dolchich ad. This is from this preseason, hitting down the seam, pretty comfortable. Like working on this vertical thread, I think that's where he's at his most comfortable. Is working down a vertical seam. I feel like that's where he looks his most explosive. More of like a stick that foot in the ground, one cut type of route runner, not going to be a high change of direction player, but he can gain some ground. I feel like he's got pretty reliable hands, snap that head around once he gets into this first window to give his, QB an easy target to work with, catch it in stride, get into the end zone, potential, another red zone target. Wouldn't be surprised. I think there will probably be a little bit of a learning curve for him, so that's probably his biggest uphill battle to see playing time is learning the playbook. But wouldn't be surprised if he ends up seeing some time at some point, especially with the lackluster tight end room. Here you see it from the back angle. Not the most fluid guy, but it has some twitch and explosiveness out of those cuts like that to get downhill vertically, gets that touchdown. Isolated as the X, like this is where you just doing like different things, like some more Darren Waller type of things. Like this is where Waller would make his impact. Isolated as like an X receiver on the backside of a 3x1. So like if Waller didn't see playing time and you wanted to use Dulcich in that area, maybe like here he goes versus a DB. Comes off the ball, gives a little slight hesitation there, at least doing something different in his route stem. Uh, Eat up the space, get physical near the top of the route, and then use like that arm bar to create some late separation, just enough while maintaining your speed through contact there to then make a catch that on a ball that's kind of slightly thrown behind you as well. Catch it with your hands, pull it away. Pretty solid all around there. Like it's nice to see him. He was kind of coming into his own with the Giants because he started his career with the Broncos. Just was never really able to get anything going. Had some injuries. He was a decent draft pick out of UCLA. I remember, him coming out. A lot of people were fans of him. So I think these two pickups are just guys with some potential at big positions of need. Those are the types of people I think you should be picking up during this time period. So hopefully, at least one of them can make some sort of impact. Dulcich, I've been trying to get tight ends out there. Not the best blocker, but he will have some serviceable blocks. Here he is getting out onto DB. I feel like this is where you can find some effectiveness out of him. He's not going to do much for his like defensive linemen. Maybe he can get some blocks versus linebackers, some types of edges. But DB's play side outside zone type of block. And I think he's more comfortable like backside kind of sealing and stuff like that. He's not going to create too much displacement, but here against the DB, he can get some movement going on, actually able to sustain that block for a decent chunk period. Not much sustain going on in most of his blocks, but at least found some positive ones. And I think when you're adding a guy like this, that is probably a better receiver, at least if he can give you something serviceable, because most of the other receivers the Dolphins have had at tight end were not even serviceable pretty much ever. And I wouldn't say, Dulcich is always serviceable, but at least throw those out there from time to time. Also gives some physical yak ability. Not going to be like an insane yak guy, but he will play with toughness, deliver some punishment like here, just, running the quick out, find some space, catch the ball, get upfield and throw his body into some DBs, fight through contact. I think, that's something the Dolphins value is your ability to work through contact with the ball in your hands. And I think there's, I would say Dulcich is pretty decent in that area. Never going to blow you away, but that's, expected from these types of pickups. This is actually really pass pro rep. I didn't see many pass protection reps, but here versus a linebacker, he kind of does a good job. They like kind of working interior, selling like a potential run here, and then he finds the linebacker, locates him, and he's actually able to sustain that, kind of slow him down, show some like anchor ability, stick with it, play with some decent technique, decent hand placement. Another area where like I'm not expecting him would to play too much, but like that's a decent rep there that could give some potential hope for the future. Here, sort of just kicking out on a defensive end. This is probably as clean as you'll see him blocking versus a big boy like this. You're not going to see displacement. Like he's not going to create movement, but if he can get he's a body on a body type of tight end. If he can at least hold his body on a body and not get completely blown off the ball, and hold on to the guy for at least a split second more than maybe the other tight ends, that could be enough to give him an actual shot. And I know I've seen people see it be like on Twitter, be like, Julian Hill, your time's up. He's not going to replace Julian Hill. He's not a Julian Hill replacement. I've seen them say the same thing about Tanner Connor. I don't think Tanner Connor's time's up. I think Dulcich might get a chance later in the season, or maybe if there's an injury that happens, because Julian Hill's really your only blocking tight end on the roster, and then Connor's going to bring value. I mean, I know they're both kind of the receiving tight ends, but Connor's plays kind of multiple different spots. Also brings a special teams value that I think the Dolphins like, and the speed value that he has is actually something the Dolphins have always really liked to have in that room, to spread the field horizontally and vertically, even if they're not necessarily touching the ball, which Dulcich can do, I think, a little bit of that vertically, but that's still something I think they like. Here he is kind of working, like this is a area where he's able to score a touchdown, play action boot. This is where they were trying to they had Tanner Connor open on this throughout the preseason. Zach Wilson couldn't hit him, but this is an area the Dolphins clearly were trying to get going in the preseason. Dulcich on decent field there, nothing too crazy, but just another one of his touchdowns. But this is something like a play where I think they value Tanner Connor because his ability to work on the move, got to be like a move tight end and getting out and like with speed out into the flat. So that's something you have to be able to do. This is another area where he could potentially maybe fight Tanner Connor for, is blocking on the move, motion, and then be like a lead blocker out in space on a DB. Because that's pretty much the only time you'll see most of these tight ends having success, is blocking a DB out in space. And you'll see Dulcich kind of, at least start initially with a decent block, kind of square the guy up, but not able to sustain it. I don't think he has great grip strength to sustain great technique overall, but he is able to get at least a body on a body in those situations. And then I had to throw this play in here just because don't let Dulcich run routes like this. Like, I don't know what he's doing here. He is not going to be a guy that you want him to like sell his routes, sink his hips, change directions, do all this fancy stuff. Like, you want his routes to contain some sort of vertical element or something where like he maintains his speed. Because man, when he tries to slow down, speed up, that is not his game. Like, he looks like he's stuck in quicksand here. So that's not something that would be part of his game. He still does kind of get open. Him and the QB are not on the same page, so the ball goes over his head or like a little behind him. But he actually is still kind of open, even though that route was actually pretty horrendous. I think Mar Hamlin's on him, but yeah. So Dulcich, guy that I like that the Dolphins added for sure. I've been looking. He was the second tight end option, I think, best tight end option outside of Jelani Woods, who the Jets ended up claiming. So the Dolphins, I guess, could have put a claimant on him because the Jets had a priority over them. So we'll never know. But they did add Dulcich to the practice squad, which I think is at least it's the right move because there's no real risk to it. I mean, he just takes up a practice squad spot. If it doesn't work out, it's not that big of a deal. But these are the types of moves you should be making. Guys who have clear talent, but just maybe didn't work out for whatever reason on their other teams. Taking shots on those players, especially at big positions of needs, is something I've always am trying to push. And just seems like sometimes it's not like they never do it, but sometimes it seems like they ignore it at certain spots. And tight end's one of those spots, so it's nice to at least see it trending in the right direction of throwing some darts out there. And I think Dulcich is a decent dart shot, so no pun intended, because I actually wasn't even thinking of that because Jackson Dart's about to throw him this touchdown. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.